Okay, great. I'll kick us off then. So, Ait Squale, Siam Nasiaya, Entha Shili, Tanitsan Laxon, Ashtaka, Tanitsan Lakongan, Tanitsan Kawitsan, Tanitsan Hamish, Haitsaka Siam, Lakongan Mastimo, Haitska Siam, Lakongan Tamuch, OCM. My name is Shaylee, like I said. My family comes from Lyaxton First Nation. We're a Coast Salish people, and as you often do on the coast, we have family all over the place. So we also have family ties to Songhees, where I work, actually, which is really nice, and to Cowichan tribes, and over in the Lower Mainland to the Squamish people. And I am broadcasting live from Lekwungen territory. As I mentioned before, I work for the Songhees Nation as the executive assistant to leadership. And I started in that role only 4 months ago. So it has been very topical records management, figuring all that stuff out as I've been navigating this role. We're gonna talk a little bit about records management from the nation perspective here, and then my co-panelists also from the government perspective and private consulting perspectives. So I will turn it over to Lisa to introduce herself.
Well, thank you so much. My name is Lisa Fulker. I'm a citizen of the Métis Nation of Alberta. I'm grateful to live, work, and learn in Edmonton on Treaty 6 territory. This is the traditional meeting ground, gathering place, trading place, and traveling route of the Cree, Dene, Anishinaabe or Saulteaux, Nakota Iska, Nakota Sioux, and Niitsitapi or Blackfoot people. It's also Métis homeland and the home of one of the largest communities of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. And I'd like to acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these ancient and sacred lands. So I work for Employment Social Development Canada or Service Canada, and I've been there for about 18 years. I don't know how I've been there that long, but I don't feel that old. Currently, I'm a senior advisor in the Assistant Deputy Minister's Office for the Western Canada and Territories region. So we have from Saskatchewan west and all of the north, so quite a large region. It's, I think, 70% of the landmass of Canada. In the 18 years I've been with the government, I spent about 8 years in administrative type position. So I've been an executive assistant and I've kind of progressively moved up in the executive rungs. So that's a little bit of background about me. And over to you, Ken.
Hello, I'd like to acknowledge that I live and work on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people, also known as the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. And Shayla, if you mispronounced that, I apologize. I've seen so many phonetic spellings on the internet that I just give it a shot and go for it. So I've been doing consulting in records management for over 25 years, and I've been doing filing and all that sort of stuff for probably about a good 30 years for all kinds of organizations, mostly provincial, mostly municipal, and then I'd say my next largest group would be First Nations, and then a smattering of societies and all that sort of good stuff. Couple things that I just wanted to mention real quick is that Bobby and I are currently engaged in developing a RIM toolkit for Fnpss. I hope, is everybody aware of that? Okay, we're behind schedule, like badly behind schedule because of my health and her having a baby. But that's life. Life has gotten in the way, but we're continuing on it, and we're looking forward to this being a very important, potentially game-changing tool for all First Nations RIM functions across Canada, but specifically for BC, it's oriented for BC. And also related to this, on behalf of the Fnpss, Bobby and I are giving training at the ARMA Canada conference. And I'm going to post the link here. There is a discount for First Nations organizations or individuals. So feel free to take a look at that. So we're doing a basic training. It's like a 9 or 10 hour training, but it's a 3-day conference. So there's going to be a lot of good stuff there. Gwen Phillips is going to be one of our keynote speakers. So plug, all done. I'm finished.
Thank you, Ken. So we thought we'd just kind of get to know the folks in our session today. So we just have some questions. I don't know if everyone knows how to use the reaction. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a whole bunch of buttons in Zoom, and there's one called reactions. And then there's a whole bunch of things you can do. You can like clap hands or give a thumbs up or laughing face or what have you. So actually, I think you press it and then it just goes away after a certain amount of time. Yeah, okay. Mine's not going away. So so I was thinking maybe what we could do is well, I'll ask some questions and then we can all like give a thumbs up or do whatever icon we want to say yes. Yes, that we do these things. So the first question is, I was going to say, give a thumbs up if you're involved in the administration of meetings for your area, like creating or distributing agendas, meeting materials, you know, organizing, booking of rooms, taking meeting minutes, records of decisions. Okay, so it looks like a majority of us. How many have a formal filing system for these documents, whether it be paper or electric document filing? Okay, a little less than half. Oh yeah, oh, almost a little, about the same amount. Oh, that's good, good. Wow, that's awesome. My next question was going to be, how many have a less than formal system? But it looks like we're all pretty good there. So that's good. And then my next question was, how many have no system? So I don't think there's any of us. So that's really great. We're doing really well there. And who here is looking to start their first IM project, like kind of developing a system for meeting materials and perfect. That's awesome. Over to you, Shaylee.
Okay, great. Thank you. So what we thought might be helpful after getting a bit of a temperature check here would be to do a little bit of a roundtable for folks to share specifics on what they're hoping to get out of this session today. So we'll go counterclockwise on my screen. And so that is starting with Layla.
Oh, hi. Right now, there's a project I'm passionate about is Indigenous languages, and I'm working on that in my my day job of Indigenous Affairs section in the CRA. We have so much good information, but a lot of that information has to be used by people that are presenting above us in up to as far as the minister. So when people come to ask about the Indigenous languages and the Act, what we're doing in the CRA and how it relates to UNDRIP, calls to action, and Indigenous languages action, what we're doing, I'd like to have it organized so we have all the pieces of information in our drive, but I want to do a deck that can be very general, that can be changed, and also have different presentations that can be presented to different people with, say, just the ADM steering committee, which talks about implementation of the Indigenous Languages Act throughout the different departments. Just what we're doing internally to CRA, and just general information, you know, so like a general information file, because a lot of people are really interested, and rightfully so, and I want to do it justice. I want it to be presented well, not hodgepodge. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Next up, we have Alexis.
Hi there, my name is Alexis. I work with the Hawaiian First Nations Government Office located in Port Alberni. So I started in the records management position about 6 months ago. Before that, we had a different records management, but her main focus wasn't records management so much. So with this, I'm just here to gather as much information as I can, because we haven't had our nation as a treaty nation, and I'm pretty much starting from the very bottom. We have no records management system. We have an archives room full of mountains of boxes. So I'm just kind of trying to gather as much information as I can to start the process of actually creating a records management. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Mom, Brenna? That feels.
Hi, Squell. Hi, Siapkasi, I'm the CA, Antha Brenna Robinson, Tanitsan Lakeson. So what I'm looking for is in my nation. So I sit on council for Liaxin in addition to my day job. And so Liaxin's in the process of digitizing its records. And I'm trying to find a system that works really well for me as an elected official. I'm trying to give our staff hasn't made it a high priority for how they do records. So essentially what's happening right now is all of the stuff is shared on Dropbox, and my Dropbox now is constantly messaging me, trying to get me to upgrade to a pro because it's so full of all my chief and council packages over the last 5 years, which I've had to, I can only keep about maybe 6 months worth of files in the free storage. So I have to keep downloading them onto my laptop and sticking it on my Apple Drive, whatever, my iCloud. So it's not a very efficient or whatnot type of system. And I've been trying to not be mean about it, but trying to figure out a way to make it work. But I'm tired. I'm also always the squeaky wheel. So I kind of feel like I have to pick my battles all the time with admin. So I haven't really, I've told them that I would like to improve our filing system, but I haven't gone into detail about it because I know that they're stretched thin. I know all the other stuff that they have to do, but it would make my life a lot easier as an elected official. And we just had our elections. So I'm thinking right now with 2 new councillors coming on board, it's the perfect time to let's just start with a clean start. So that's what I'm hoping to gain today by attending these workshops, is trying to figure out a way so that it's less stressful on everybody. I just want it to be efficient and effective and organized for all of us.
Awesome. I will definitely be able to speak to that. Susan? Oh, I think.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So I'm basically interested in seeing how some people do set up their systems and see if there's improvement for, setting up sub files under, different categories and whatnot.
Thank you. Wendy? So Wendy's popped into the chat, hoping to connect with others, just starting out and putting everything in place. Learning any tips to help me along. My guide is the toolkit. So far, I have picked up a few good tips, like hiring a student, studying in archiving and or library systems, which is great. Actually, in our small breakout room, almost my whole group is in here. So we had Wendy and we had Layla and we had Susan, and Susan shared that their nation hired summer students over the course of 4 years to do all of the virtual archiving and all the scanning and all that kind of stuff. And all of us were like, that's an amazing idea, because then that covers all the funding requirements and all that kind of stuff. And then Colette, did you want to share anything?
No, I'll just say, yeah, great to be here. I'm part of the organizing committee, work for the Government of Canada, the BC Federal Council Secretariat, and joining you from the beautiful unceded territory, the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. And yeah, I'm just learning so much, loving it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just take a quick look over to my agenda here. Starting with an agenda. Okay. So we thought it might be helpful to talk a little bit about basics. And when we did our little check-in, we saw that a lot of folks are involved with creations of agendas and like all that kind of stuff when it comes to admin work. Lisa, would you mind taking over for a sec? My throat is drying out.
Absolutely.
Great.
So we kind of put down some basics. So like, what is an agenda? What are the supporting documents? What are meeting minutes versus records of decision? So just kind of quickly, so I'll try not to read it, but an agenda is a document given to attendees before the meeting that lists what you want to discuss. It also is a timetable. So my last boss was very strict on not going over. If you had 10 minutes for your agenda item, you had 10 minutes for that agenda item, and she was going to move you along because it helps keeps you on track. So you're able to talk about all those things that you need to discuss at the meeting, because otherwise sometimes one item could take up the whole meeting, and then you haven't been able to have that fulsome discussion. So it's a guide for the discussion, ensures people don't speak out of turn or for too long, gives a checklist so that all topics are discussed, and it helps the note taker more easily take record the minutes or the records of decision.
Thank you. And so what we will often see on agendas is that there are supporting documents that go along with those. And so just really quickly, supporting documents are anything that's related to your agenda items that provide background information, additional context, perhaps a presentation from like a slide deck if you have a presentation, or anything that presenters provide. So they can review it ahead of time, or, you know, if needed, they can, like, for example, sorry, my cat is trying to knock over my laptop. And he completely made me lose my train of thought. Supporting documents, presentations, yeah. Oh, and if there's anything that the folks who are attending the meeting say, for example, it's a chief and council meeting, say there's anything big on there that they want to review ahead of time and have a little bit of a discussion. So it's really helpful for that. And it's just handy to note on your agenda if you've got supporting documents for something. And I think we're going to get a little bit more into procedures and that kind of stuff after. And then meeting minutes also are a big one. And so this was one that was a really great learning opportunity for me actually when I started at Songhees, because I've always been very familiar, you know, with taking minutes, reviewing minutes. I worked in the government for some time as well. But working directly to support chief and council felt like scary in a way. So it's like, oh my gosh, this is a big deal, right? I want to make sure that everything is captured properly and that I don't miss things, or that I'm not putting too much information in, or, you know, kind of walking that line. And so what was helpful for me, of course, was just reviewing like previous minutes, but they're meant to be a brief snapshot, right? So that you can kind of get a gist of the conversation from what you see there. So trying to keep that in mind and remembering the purpose of minutes, I find can be really helpful. And then, Lisa, do you want to cover the last one?
Sure. And then there are records of decision, and so those those can be kind of just a record of what was decided. So, you know, agenda item 1 talked about this and we decided this. So it can be very short and sweet, so that it's recorded, the decisions can be recorded and then they can be communicated to others. And also so you can keep a historical of what was decided, but they could also be meeting minutes and records of decision where it records kind of a summary of the discussion and the decision taken. So it depends on the needs of your organization or of the meeting and what exactly you want to record. And then after we thought we'd talk a little bit about kind of the procedures for organizing meetings in our respective areas, because I mean, they could be different depending on who you support and the types of meetings that are hosted. So maybe I'll go into my side. So I work for the Assistant Deputy Minister. So she has basically back-to-back meetings almost all day. So some are organized by others, some we are the ones to lead the meetings. So basically, before the meeting takes place, the agenda is drafted and given final approval by the meeting organizer. So usually somebody takes a lead, like myself. I'm the one tasked with collecting the agenda items. So I might just be going to the organizer and asking them what they would like to see, or depending on the meeting, I might be going out to all of the attendees to say, what is there anything you would like to discuss or present on in the meeting? And so we put those, the agenda together, list the items, and then get approval from generally the organizer. If there are others presenting, we confirm if they have any documents. If they do have documents they want to share, we usually ask that they be given out or given to us at least 48 hours before the meeting so we can send them to participants. Again, so that they can have time to read, review, and potentially consult with others on the topics of the material. So in our region, the Assistant Deputy Minister's portfolio is enormous. So, you know, she deals with so many different program lines, EI, pensions, programs, temporary foreign workers, investigations, that there's no way on earth she could know everything in detail that's going on. So when she attends a meeting, we look at these agenda items and these materials, and we actually go out to the people that support her, so her executive directors, and we get background information on those items. So what's going on? Are there any issues you would like to flag so that my boss can be a champion for those programs and go back and say, you know, that's an issue for us in our region. So it's very, very important for us that we receive those documents in advance, and we don't always, but we like work really hard to try and show the importance of getting that stuff in advance. And then at the meeting, generally there's somebody assigned to take the meeting notes or the records of decision. After the meeting, they draft them, have them approved by the meeting organizer, and then often it gets sent out to the attendees to say these are the meeting minutes and or records of decision. Do you have any changes? And then once they're finalized, then we distribute the final copies to attendees, and then of course save everything that's been created for this meeting into a folder somewhere. So that's kind of how it works for us in my area. And what about you, Shaylee?
Yeah, so I manage the calendar of our executive director. So I handle all of her scheduling, and we're not always able to get agendas for meetings that she's in, which is unfortunate because she's in a lot of them. But I'm able to have a little bit more of a firmer hand when it comes to chief and council. One of our consultants has joked that I'm the council gatekeeper, so nothing gets through to them without going through me first. Generally speaking, that's what we aim for. And so I'm the one who pulls together all the agenda packages. And I'm going to speak to the question that Brenna popped into the chat. So I'm going to share my screen actually. And so I'm going to show an agenda for our last council meeting, which was last week. I'm not going to show the entire thing, just this little snapshot here. So I've got this thing up here, an asterisk, saying that, you know, supplementary attachments, supporting documents, whatever. And so when there is an item that has supporting documents, I just put an asterisk at the end of it. And then that keeps it easy for them to be aware. Nice and simple. And then in terms of like actually accessing the documents and getting them, so when folks request to be on council's agenda, you know, I let them know kind of the procedures and if they're going to be able to make it to whatever, and like we set a day, but I don't actually confirm what time slot they're going to have until they send me their supporting documents. So that works most of the time, not all the time, because sometimes folks are waiting on stuff externally and all of that. And I do endeavor to get packages to council a little sooner than folks normally do. So council always meets on Wednesdays at Songhees, and I try and get them their packages by the end of the day, Friday. So they've got the entire weekend to review, as well as Monday and Tuesday, because all of council, just like Brenna said, they all have full-time jobs in addition to being elected councilors. And so that works sometimes, getting people to send that in. And then in terms of like actually sharing the information, so we use SharePoint, or we're starting to use SharePoint. We've actually been kind of like changing our systems a little bit since I stepped into my role, because there was a 3-month period where Songhees didn't have an executive assistant, and also for part of that time was the gap between having an executive director. And so things were not the most organized. Everyone was like stretched very thin, just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. And so it was a really great opportunity actually for me to come in and be able to kind of assert how things were going to be functioning and make it work for me. And so we've started using SharePoint a lot more. Is everyone familiar with SharePoint? No? Okay, I saw a head shake. So SharePoint is an extension of Microsoft Office, and it is web-based. And so you can save your files directly to your SharePoint from your computer. So you can access it anywhere. And if you're like me and you have no professional boundaries in your personal life, I've also got the app on my phone and I can check it all whenever I need to. So that's been really helpful. And so what I've been doing is I have actually, you know what, I think I can share, where did my mouse go? There it is. I will share my screen again and show you what my SharePoint looks like, so you can get a bit of an idea when I'm talking about this. So I kind of just set up all of my folders for the most part according to departments that we have within the nation. So admin, education, finance, health, public works, SDC, that's our development corporation. And then I have a couple additional things that are helpful for me. Like I have a templates folder where I keep all my templates for everything. And then community folder, so that's anything relating to the community as a whole. So like community meetings, I take those minutes and prepare those agendas, all that kind of stuff. And then attachments is an automatic folder that SharePoint or OneDrive created, that it'll, if you're saving something from your phone or whatever, it'll automatically go in there if you don't want to sort it yourself. And so I keep my stuff for council under my governance folder. And so I go into governance, and then there's stuff, you know, for some of our lawyers and stuff like that. But if I go into chief and council, then I have a folder for band council resolutions, which is where I also keep records of decision. And then you can see I haven't fully organized everything yet. There's some stuff that's kind of still needing to be filed. I have a folder for council meeting packages. And then I'm a little bit neurotic, if you can't tell. So I keep everything by month. And then we have sometimes multiple meetings in a month. So then there's a whole folder for the package. And then within there, I keep all of the files that are relevant to that meeting. So that's a lot of information and that's a lot of data. And so I do it this way because it's sometimes too much to include all of that in an email that goes out to council. And then so I can share that link with my council, and then also in the calendar item itself, I can put all of those files in there so they have easy access that way, as well, again, as including the link. I am gonna turn it over to Alexis, who has her hand up for a question.
So in that sense, how does that work for the records management part? Because so if you're using that for yourself, how does that work? Like, I don't know how else to explain what I'm trying to ask.
I think I know where you're going with
Okay,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's my system. And so then we have shared drives that are connected to the Songhees network, which you can only access when you're physically on the Songhees network. So I can't access that from home. So we have a general drive that all of our staff can access, and it'll have folders for stuff that's, you know, pertinent to everybody. And then there's separate shared drives that you only have access to depending on your position. So we have a separate shared drive specifically just for governance. And so only council, the executive director, myself, the executive assistant, and maybe our policy analyst have access to that. And so once I have everything, you know, filed and sorted on my end, then I migrate it over to that shared or that shared drive. So it's all in there as like a permanent kind of thing, because SharePoint is only accessible by me because it's attached to my account, and I'm the only one who has control over that unless I delegate control to somebody, right? So it's that's a really good question, is making sure that there's a way to, you know, tie that over to everyone else, and that plays into succession planning and all of that kind of stuff as well, right? So that is how I do that, like really basic storage and preparation for like a meeting and an agenda, that kind of thing. I feel like I'm going all over the place here with what I'm talking about. Maybe we'll turn it over to Ken for a minute. Ken, if you want to share a little bit about how you approach that stuff in your work as a consultant and a contractor.
So the way that you have it organized is excellent. That's the way to do it. Now, keep in mind that SharePoint is different than OneDrive. It is and it isn't. For our purposes, we may as well say that it is. So if you're dealing in OneDrive, it's a lot easier because it can be set up and you're a lot more familiar with the structure because it looks like a shared drive structure. If you're in SharePoint, it's a different creature altogether. So you need to be very careful when you tread into SharePoint. It's a good platform, but you need to be aware of what you're going into. The nice thing about your structure is that being able to apply retention and disposition is a lot easier when you have it organized the way that you have it organized, because you can go in and you can say, okay, we're going to permanently retain this. We're going to keep this forever because we're talking about minutes and agendas and stuff like that. One of the tricky bits is when you said we're going to permanently keep this on a shared drive. That's not a great situation. But I mean, I can realize that at this point in time, that's probably the best solution that you've got. But we're all in an evolving situation with digital permanent preservation. So there'll be more information on that to come, I'm sure, in the future. Yeah, I'll chime back in just before the retention and disposition portion, if you like, because I'll have something to say about this whole discussion that we've been having, which is really good.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. And yeah, that brings up something that I had forgotten to mention as well, is that all of this digital filing and everything in the shared drive is all fairly new. It's only been in place for the last few years with the nation. And we have a lot of hard copy files that are sitting in totes in the basement, waiting to be scanned and implemented into a more formal filing system, which nation hasn't been able to come up with yet, because there's just not the capacity for that. And I think that that's probably something that a lot of communities share and feel those frustrations with. I'm seeing a thumbs up, and I know Lyaxon, we struggle with that as well. And so it's kind of a for now system, right? As we look to find something more long-term, more permanent, that's also more secure, because, you know, when you're putting your stuff into OneDrive or wherever, like you don't have like, I think they have like rights to access it or something like that. I don't know. I'm not someone who knows a lot about cybersecurity. But yeah, that's a really good point. Lisa, do you want to talk for a bit about how you do that?
Actually, ours looks a lot like what you've done. Yeah, I was very surprised. I'm like, wow, it's so similar. So I actually was going to show kind of our structure, and I'll just do it for fun, maybe just because it is so similar. Sorry, I've never shared on this before. I guess I'll share like this. Can you tell me? So this is what our shared drive looks like. So basically, I came in here a couple years ago, and ours had like a gajillion folders here, and it really stressed me out. And I said, no, we cannot have it like this. So I said, let's keep it simple. Let's only have like 5 folders to go into, so that, you know, it's a lot easier. So we kind of tried to break it down really simple, you know, administration, correspondence, documents by topic is kind of one where you could search by like, oh, we're looking for something on temporary foreign workers, you know, EI. So search like that. And then of course we have HR non-sensitive. So things related to HR that aren't about a person. Our ones about a person are actually in the restricted, and these folders are all locked down. So because you don't want everybody to have everybody else's personal information, right? But if you look at our meetings and committees, it's very similar. So we have national governance committees. We have other national meetings, regional governance committees, and then we have other regional meetings, interdepartmental, intergovernmental. So in our national governance, these are kind of the ones that I guess my boss attends the most regularly. You know, there's usually like a couple a week. So we have the meeting name. And again, we tried to keep things really simple and easy to understand. So this is the PMB meeting. And then there's lots of documents, so it's just going to take a second to load. Then we have again by fiscal year. So our fiscal year in the government runs April 1st to March 31st. So we decided to organize it that way instead of by calendar year, like January to December. And then we have, again, the meeting dates. And then once you go in, we have all the documents. So the agenda, what they do a lot is they create an e-binder where it's just one huge document with everything in it. So the agenda, supporting documents, and then often they'll have records of decision from the past meeting, and then a forward agenda showing what may be discussed previously. So I'm actually surprised at how similar our record keeping systems are. And my tips on that, basically, sorry, I don't know how to unshare. Do you know how I unshare?
It should
Or
be a
sharing,
thing.
stop share.
There you go.
I found it. Thank you. Yeah, my tips on that was just going to be, you know, like keep it as simple as possible. Simple words, a short, because you don't want to get too long. Also, oftentimes there's a limited amount of character space. So, you know, instead of putting the whole meeting name, which would be Portfolio Management Board, which is quite long, we put PMB. So we try and keep things kind of as short and sweet as possible. And same with naming a document, try and do like agenda. We don't put any spaces. So you put maybe a little hyphen, the meeting name. So PMB, and then, another hyphen, and then the date of the meeting. So however date format you use. And then usually we'll put, another hyphen, and then either final, or maybe it's the first draft, or maybe it's version 1, version 2, version 3. So you know kind of where you're at in modifying that document. Because sometimes, the agenda can go through a number of iterations before it's finalized, things added or removed. And you may, in the immediate, want to keep a record of how that agenda may have changed. But once the agenda is finalized, it's no longer really relevant how it's changed. So then you can go ahead and delete all those other versions and keep the final version. That was kind of all I had to say about the information management in terms of who stores them in our area. Everyone's in charge of storing their own stuff that they're working on. But we do kind of have, I guess, nothing really written down, but we have kind of guidelines of how we store things, and when. We really should be writing them down and making, like, let's say, a cheat sheet, or what some people call an SOP, a standard operating procedure, so that, someone new to the unit comes in, we can give them this one sheet, one pager to say, this is how we store things in our unit, so that we're all consistent. So I think that would be a best practice that we should do in our area. And yeah, I think that's all I had to say about a file management.
Yeah, and that reminded me as well that in terms of just naming, as you can see, I like to be very specific when I name things. And if there's a folder that's tied to something specifically, I always start it with the date and then whatever it is. And then when it comes to files, I always start a file name with the date and then what type of document it is. Is it a letter? Is it an agenda? Is it minutes? Whatever, I write that. And then, yeah, typically I'll go underscore and then the title and try and keep it short, and using acronyms where I can as well. But not too many to the point where I'm not remembering what I'm talking about anymore. I used to work for the Ministry of Forests in BC, and I had like my first 2 pages of my notebook were just a cheat sheet of all of the abbreviations and acronyms because there were so many. So I'm really glad that I don't have to do that anymore. And then to answer some of the questions that have popped up in the chat, so I should be more mindful. I'm talking about OneDrive, not SharePoint. Thank you, Ken, for pointing out that distinction. So the digital files are linked to a hard copy file sometimes. Typically, like for a council meeting, I print out everything that is on the agenda, including the agenda itself, minutes, all the supporting documents, and then I keep file folders in my filing cabinet that have all of that there. So there's easy access for that. And I'm not sure if that's following procedures, because we don't really have any formal file storage procedures, and everyone again just kind of does it off the side of their desk. But I am of the mindset that the more backup there is, the better, and I'm very not quite paranoid, but always worried about something slipping through or something getting deleted that shouldn't be. And so I always err on the side of caution of having things accessible in as many places as I can. And then, I guess that kind of answers the question about backups as well. Storing in different areas because of fire. So we're really lucky at Songhees. We actually have all of our operations and community programs come out of the Songhees Wellness Center, which is a really beautiful building that went up about, I want to say 8 years ago. And so it is like got all of the fire retardant protection and all of that kind of stuff. So everything that's stored in terms of archives and files and everything is in a room that's like fire safe. So hopefully that won't ever be a problem. Yeah, I think I'm just going to talk in circles if I keep going there. So we went over where to store, how to store, who stores. I don't think we really need to talk into why it's important to store documents. I think we kind of all understand that as a baseline. You know, you always need to be able to have that information, and also you never know when something's going to be relevant again, right? When you're going to need a piece of information, could come up, you know, several years down the road. Also, you know, there's legislative requirements for storing information. So I think we're good to drop over to talking about records retention and disposal, which is probably good because we only have a few more minutes before we come back as a big group. So Lisa or Ken, whichever.
Go ahead.
Yep. This has been a helpful dive into an important information management stream related to board documentation. One thing to realize is that these, often we call these kinds of things workflows. So this happens, then this happens, then that happens. And so it's nice to have a workflow. So, and Lisa, you already touched on this, which I was grinning to hear you talk about it, that having a one pager that says, this is meeting minutes or something like that. And then you can say this. We're going to use this naming convention, that sort of thing. That is an awesome sort of process to have for really important sets of records. Now that one pager should be collected with other one pagers into a corporate records management manual. And then there needs to be a realization that there's a much higher level of policies and procedures which starts to be required. Things like thou shalt have a naming convention and things like this. So having a separate page with your acronyms listed on it and common terms is a must-have for that records management manual. So when you have a new, like I noticed that one of the names of your committees changed. So you can have on that naming conventions acronyms, what the old one was, what the new one is, defunct, that sort of thing. It's invaluable for when change happens in your organization. So that's some really good stuff to know. And we're kind of just scratching the surface here, but this foundational stuff is important to kind of understand and realize that this happens at this level, and this is where we're starting. But there's a big world that starts to open up. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. I mean, if you're at my level, you realize you're a dummy, because there's just, I mean, now we're talking about data management and stuff like this, and I'm like, oh, I got to go back to school. So take it step by step, and yeah, don't freak out. And remember, there's tons of resources out there: Fnpss, ARMA, your colleagues, all that sort of stuff. So I think that's kind of all I want. Oh, there was one more thing that I wanted to say. If a document is created digitally, it can exist digitally as long as it's in a properly protected system, a record keeping system, without having to be printed off. So a digital record can be brought to court. If you receive something in paper, scanning it is fine for your own convenience, but don't destroy that hard copy. Please don't, because you're going to be in trouble. You could potentially be in trouble. Better to live electronically first than even get into scanning. That's my recommendation. Anyways, I'm done.
I would agree there. We've tried to move away as much as possible from keeping paper records, although there are times when we must, and that was a good clarification. You know, if it came to you in paper, it has to stay in paper, although you can scan it for your own purposes, but legally it has to remain that way. I'm cognizant of the time that we may be pulled back into the to the larger group any minute. Hopefully we'll get kind of a little warning. Oh, yeah, we have about a minute. Ken or Shaylee, is there anything else you wanted to add before we get sucked away?
No, I think the bottom line for me is just finding a system that makes sense to you. And I think that we've heard that a few times already today, but ultimately you're not going to be able to navigate a system if it doesn't make sense to you, right? And so that would be my biggest takeaway. And then once you have a thing in place that works for you, then seeing how that can kind of spread across your organization.
I would agree. And then try and stay consistent, create a cheat sheet if you can, and, you know, devote a little time every day to work on it, even if it's 5 minutes, because 5 minutes is better than nothing, you know. It'll get you far in the long run.
Thanks, everybody. That was excellent.